Ultimately, I think the biggest aspect of being human is to live as a human.
Damn.
I know it's the answer that nobody likes. We all want to know these different answers into such a narrow concept, but ultimately, there are universal traits of humanity that we all share. We live, we breathe, we experience, we learn, we commune.
We have consciousness.
We have consciousness, we have community, we have interaction. Even if we are considered or feel ourselves to be alone, there's always outreach of interaction within this world. And I think through that experience, the experiences that you have in themselves and the commonalities of all humans themselves are what it is to be human. And I think the more that we could delve into those commonalities and universalities of human nature and human traits is the definite way that we could truly understand what it is to be human in a more detailed way than to be human is to be human and to live is to live.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Yo, what's good, everybody? Boho Hobo is coming back at you with another episode of Bindlism, a philosophy to a self-sufficient lifestyle. On this week's episode, we're featuring Art Cowart. Our good friend Artie is an independent thinker who's on a journey to help humanity by helping humanity itself. With this vision, he has relentless ambition to become a psychologist and gain a deeper understanding of human nature through first-hand clinical experience and academic research. Artie presents to us today with genius insight and rational thought to support it. So, without any further hesitation, we introduce you all to Art Cowart. We're here in the Gear Factory, chilling at Andy's place. Glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me. It's honestly a huge honor. I'm very intimidated. I've listened to your stuff, and there's so many people who do so many different things, and then you come to me, and it's like, we want you on. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I'll just go off the cuff about everything, but I have no idea why you have me here or what it is, but I'm eternally grateful, so thank you so much.
Our paths crossed, and we were at a bar one day, just like shooting the shit, and you got into some deeper topics. Philosophically speaking, and I thought you'd be a cool person to like understand your perspective on and your worldview. You tend to look at things from like a greater vantage point of like seeing things, like the bigger picture of things.
Oh, well, thanks. It's honestly, it's a product of dissociative identity disorder.
I'll go right out with it. We can get in there.
Well, essentially, that's a common symptom for dissociation, and it is something that I have, and I'm very open about it everywhere I go. I think it's important to have that kind of rapport and to kind of make it more normal. Too many people, and it's come a long way since it has before, but mental health was strongly stigmatized even a decade ago.
Yeah.
So if anyone had any sort of signs of depression, especially in males, it was very hard to open up about it. So I just decided, hey, I have it, and I do it proper. I see therapy, and I make sure everything's okay. So I like to be some sort of role model, self-anointed, in order to help further kind of break the mold of what we consider mental health and how people interact with their disorders. So that's what I do.
Well, it's also bringing light to the situation and not seeing it as like you have an issue, a problem.
Right. And I think that's a product of the name. Essentially, you call it a disorder, but I consider it a condition. It is a situational factor where, but the biggest issue is when it's a disorder, that's when it interrupts your day-to-day life. Right. And it's hard to get out of that because it is something that is so abnormal and deviant from what we consider normalcy, which obviously up to question. What is normal? What is weird? All that.
So I've heard that argument before that people who don't have a quote disorder see it as abnormal, but people with certain disorders, I'm not saying ones that are literally like life changing that make it very difficult, but like certain mental disorders, if you will, those people tend to say like, I don't feel any different. Like I like the way I am and I'm okay with it.
Right. Because it's over encompassing and it's something that is just generational or generated based on that person's perspective or who that person is, and you embody that because it's your brain and it's responding this way.
It's your perspective,
right? And using the common identifiers such as dissociation, psychosis, depression, anxiety, eating disorders or anything of that sort, it helps further classify it so you could better integrate or better work with whatever ailment or situation that you're dealing with. I learned a lot of this from school, and I also studied a lot of it growing up. Did learn about myself and others too. But
to take a couple steps back, just to get some context, do you want to describe to us what exactly is dissociative identity disorder?
Yeah, essentially, it's more of.
Is there like a surname that people know it?
DID.
Is it?
Yeah,
Okay,
DID. It was formerly known as multiple personality disorder. Essentially, it's isolated characteristical traits that kind of separate. It may be due to trauma. It may be due to genetics. However, there are specific characteristics that embody as their own separate entity, and as a result, it makes people kind of have this feeling of being outside of yourself in certain aspects. You don't feel a connection or some sort of relationship with yourself when you look in the mirror. Like, for example, you look in the mirror, you guys are like, yeah, that's me. Cool. I feel that. I get that. For me, I have to really look in the mirror and say, yeah, that's me, I guess. I mean, I don't see any semblance of connection, but I'm aware that is me in that body. But there's times where you have out-of-body experiences, or it's kind of a disconnect from reality in a way.
Isn't there benefits to that sometimes?
Sometimes. A lot of people will say that they have dissociative traits, or that they dissociate, like, for example, through muscle memory. If you drive the same route all the time, sometimes as you drive by, it feels a lot quicker, and you just kind of go on autopilot.
Yeah.
That's technically considered dissociation in that respect. When it becomes a disorder, that's when you kind of don't have the connect to help kind of accommodate for those automated behaviors.
Right.
So, like, living your day-to-day life, are you always, like, your head's up in the clouds kind of feeling?
Not always for me, but that's because it's taken years of work and study. But a lot of times you will feel outside of yourself, like you're from the outside looking in, and you were just kind of a hollow husk, just trying to go through, or you may only find specific pieces of yourself that you connect with based on responses.
Interesting.
I'm very off the cuff about it. I didn't really come prepared, and
right, yeah.
I feel like it's hard for say someone who has no mental condition to fully grasp, because there's no way to really experience it, and that's maybe
it's hard
like
with somebody with dissociation to even
yeah.
grasp. It's just it's such a weird concept.
I'm sure everyone has a different perspective
and there's
on
different
what it feels
kinds.
like.
There's like different varying levels of body dysmorphia, where people don't feel comfortable in their own body. There's ways where people may identify with certain characteristics at a certain time, or have differing opinions based on those fragmented and isolated characteristical traits.
Got it.
And there's also the extreme, and there's parts, like, for me, example, where if you get into a state of mind where you're so separated from reality, you consider that fabrication or that kind of daydreaming state to be the norm. And it's hard to differentiate between the two for me, because there's such an emotional disconnect between them, and it's very akin to having a dream or being in that state, and you just have to learn how to work with that.
So, as someone on the outside observing your behavior, what would someone, I guess, observe in your behavior if you were like having a dissociative moment, if you will?
It ultimately is dependent on the person. I don't know too much about specifics and case by case, just because every single person's different in how they respond and react. But some commonalities and common things that you can find is traits that were established through trauma. A lot of people will go to that, especially therapists, where they see it reminiscent of a fight or flight behavior, and you that made you survive, so your brain's like, I'm going to keep it in this area.
So you're always trying to, like, avoid the situation almost?
It's not so much an avoidance, although that could be a result. I don't think it's directly related to the dissociation. However, in a similar situation, you may be more apt to revert back to that similar state because it helped you survive at one point.
So do you get, like, tense in certain situations where you're like fight or flight kind of response?
I mean, I do, yes, but that's because I've unfortunately been in situations where I've had to activate that, and the fight or flight was kind of do or die, unfortunately. But afterwards, I always have to make sure that I check myself and just make sure everything's okay. But ultimately, for me personally, I'm kind of at the end of it. Like growing up, I kind of realized that at an early age because my mother also has it. So I kind of saw the common traits and I was like, okay, little 10-year-old me needs to figure this out. What do I do? I was like, oh, well, here's some books. So I just started reading up about it and helping understand kind of relationships and working from there. But yeah.
And is that where because I remember us talking before and you were saying at a young age you started reading textbooks all the time. Is that where?
Oh yeah, that was one of the starts. Also, I've always had this notion that I want to try to save the world. And I've had that ever since I was a kid. And I thought the best way to save humanity was through humanity itself. And when I thought that was the best people to save people as people, I started studying things about people. And the most open thing for me were psychology books and these different textbooks that my dad because my dad started taking courses as well to be an MP, which he is. He's very smart and he's great. I love my dad. But ultimately, having those books, I was able to sneak them late at night when I was supposed to go to bed. And
nice.
Yeah, so I would just sneak a couple upstairs and start reading through and figuring out, how different things work and operate, different areas of the brain, behaviors. And as it turns out, we don't really know too much. That's the biggest thing that I've learned from learning.
So you said that the best way to save humanity is through humanity itself.
I think so.
In practical terms, how would you implement that in this mission of yours?
A lot of these common behaviors or a lot of the problems that we face are completely derivative of human nature and human behavior. You could see, the economy and problems with the economy. It's because we established the economy that way. So ultimately, it is our responsibility as people who establish that to be what it is to also be responsible for it as it's going. So things in terms of that, everything that we've produced, especially with environmental, that's a very common answer. Sorry, I'm very brambly. It'll just kind of
Well, like a lot of the reasons why the economy changes, the core of it is because of our human behavior.
Yeah.
We react. The economy as a whole reacts.
Yeah, there's a lot of subjectivity to what we place value upon. And also the way that we implement value through the currency we use. I mean, long story short, if you look from aliens coming in, they're like, well, they're just working with weird paper. What's so funny about it? And they're just trying to look through it and figure it out. But to us, we've established that value and we've established what it is as a currency. So that way there's a quantifiable and accessible way to establish value all throughout things that may need value implemented.
And what is that value? Where is that value derived from? Just to get a basic understanding first before we delve in.
You put a value on 2 chickens, you might think that it's worth 2 cows, but the other guy down the road thinks it's worth 3 cows, and the other one thinks it's 2 and a calf. But if you say, hey, I got 10 of these green things, is that fair? And they're like, yeah, 10 green things? Okay. And then you kind of establish that through, it's more societal. In terms of that, because now we're getting in semiotics.
I also think that by having a currency, it allows you to not have to go without an item that you might actually need. So, when bartering, you have to get rid of an item that you currently have in exchange for something else. Whereas in the current system, you just get rid of a piece of paper and you still keep your items.
Right. Okay.
Because societally speaking, we've established the worth for that, and then we determine worth based on that reference, the quantifiable reference, which is our current currency.
This kind of gets philosophical in the sense of what is, in your personal opinion, the highest value for humanity, and that's going to kind of determine how we can save humanity, from what I'm hearing. If you link the two, of economics and human behavior.
Well, yeah. I think in terms of placing the value and making it fair, it's just a problem with that, where there's a lot of things that are driven by currency. I'm not an economist, but I do know that a lot of people are less fortunate if they don't have that present value of currency that was established early on, and they don't have the accessibility. So I think having a fair set of accessibility, regardless, and have it outside of that current sales value, essentially kind of an evasive capitalistic means, if you want to go like that. Essentially, I think things that incorporate somebody's survival and livelihood shouldn't have as bad of a value or as high of a value.
Make it easier, more accessible
Universal.
to have.
Well, yeah,
Well-being.
like
Universal
basically,
healthcare.
there's like certain things that should just inherently be accessible to everyone, because when you're like, at the end of the day, we're all gonna die. So like anything that you do or acquire throughout your lifetime won't matter at some point to your person, because you will no longer exist.
Oh yeah.
So it's like, why not at least have somewhat of a fair playing field for certain things that at least allow you to like survive.
Right, because if we establish that role in humanity to ensure people's survival, then it could help save humanity. So
Right.
save humanity through humanity itself. Establish ways of communion and societal values that sort of not so much transcend valuable currency, if we're going to stay on the subject of economy, but focus more on what is necessary of our due diligence as a human being in support of other human beings.
Right.
Taking the personal responsibility.
Yeah. We're a whole species of human beings that have thrived and survived based on the communion of all of us together. Early age hominids went from Northern Africa to Western Europe because they actually developed tasks and roles within their small established community to help kind of divvy the workload and allow a higher chance of survival through their community.
Right.
And that's something we do now, just exponentially, in terms of our different jobs, our different positions, and things of that sort. So,
And you said that you support more on the liberal end of this.
I'm very
understanding.
liberal, but reasonably so.
So
I think there needs to be a set order of things in order to make sure that the liberal things can happen. They can't be all willy-nilly and disorganized.
Yeah.
Otherwise nothing will
And
happen.
just the same as like anyone who is, you know, more on the conservative side, like there has to be some foundational things to hold those more far right ideas from getting out of control. Like you gotta balance it.
yeah, definitely. And like we can appreciate that you're a liberal or conservative, but the more interesting thing is understanding like why someone came to be on that left side, on that right side.
Right.
So could you kind of take us down the path of like understanding exactly why, well, what kind of liberal views you have and why you necessarily lean towards that way?
Yeah, sure. Anything to not talk about economy, because I know nothing about it.
Yeah.
I was just really, really bull spinning the whole time. But
You seem to know what you're doing.
I can really talk a mean talk, let me tell you what. But I guess ultimately the reason why I incorporate and enforce very liberal views, especially socially, is because they're so minuscule, they're more personal, they shouldn't really be up for judgment simply because of what they are. So long as you're not hurting yourself, others, or the world around you, I think there's a lot that can be valued from that kind of freedom. So having more of liberal freedoms in order to do the things that we can, while also establishing accessibility for those individuals to be so free, is something that could really help not only diversify the populace the way that we should be and try our best to express despite the adversities we face, but can also really bring out the best in people without it being suppressed from the lapses of judgment that may come through these liberal means and people trying to combat it because it's not what they think is right. I think the sense of morality may be a little too extreme at times. I have a nose ring. It's coming a long way, but there was a long time ago, back in the year 2008, where it was huge taboo to even have a nose ring or to have your ears stretched. And then all of a sudden there was huge influx, which was amazing because people were realizing that it's of a different meaning. Whereas in the 70s and 80s, it was something that was very taboo and subject to, S&M and like that's what it was encapsulating and surrounding, and there was different meaning behind it, and it wasn't as safe. Whereas nowadays they have, professional piercers with bloodborne pathogen degrees and certificates to make sure they do it safely. And it kind of is encapsulated a different meaning. And I think it's through that we're allowed to be more liberal in a sense. So that's a good example as to why, how we're kind of getting a lot better.
That kind of lends itself to libertarian like the freedom to be your own person.
Yeah.
Freedom of the individual.
People are wonderful. I think, just like every single human being of this world lives such a vibrant and diverse life compared to the person next to them.
Yeah.
And there's no way it's exactly the same, but at the same time, you find parallels in the pathway and commonalities, like the job you pick, which is how we met, and now the podcast that we're doing. But we're all completely different people. And I think that we need to bring to light that kind of diversity and the uniqueness that is to be one particular human in a world of 7 billion humans. And to be able to incorporate that and bring that to light and challenge the adversities that come with being so different and allowing more of an accessibility, I think that's a key factor into the communion of humanity in a very broad and grand sense.
And obviously, like, there's limits to...
Oh, of course.
Because, like, we could go down the route where people are dressing up like bananas and going to work.
Right. Great for Halloween.
Yeah. But like, I get what you're saying, though. Like, I just think, like, societally, over the history, there's been a few people who have set these, like, expectations for what people should look like and wear and how you should be in certain situations. And if you break that, like, norm, you're, like, ostracized.
Right. And I think at certain times, rightfully so.
Yeah.
When it comes to those societal norms, they are established communicatively as a group.
For a reason.
In order to better integrate people into this communal group. So I think it's very important to establish those things. I think we can be a little bit more liberal with it nowadays because those groups are established, and maybe kind of a change of pace based on what we are now could be in effect. But as far as the liberal kind of thoughts go and the way to express ourselves, I think it's something that should not be taken away from a person simply for existing. However, if they are doing something that requires a specific means or action for various reasons, like, for example, a dress code because you're accommodating for certain people and they have this kind of expectation and you agree to that, then you live up to that.
Right.
It's the way that I think people should be able to express themselves is freely on a personal level. When you integrate yourself socially, it's great to bring that to light as well and not have that judged upon in your own life, especially if you're trying to work alongside the demands that were put on you in terms of that.
I think both sides want freedom.
They do.
That's a given. And the question or the argument on the conservative side would be that, okay, if you want universal access, you want, like, the ability to freely express yourself, by you lending money to the government, let's say, to have these universal programs, it restricts your personal freedom to you go and do what you want because now you're beholden to the government system.
Well, I think offering some money as somebody who is beholden to a good government system that would provide those resources, I think that's a reasonable...
So now it's trust. We have to have the trust that leadership is going to point.
Well, yeah, through communion comes
right
trust, because if we have specific roles, I like to, when it comes to big things like this, I like to narrow it down to that kind of hominid stage, because essentially when it comes to communion and societal roles, it was that, but at an earlier time.
Yeah.
Not to say that we're all, hominids, because we're clearly not. I'm human. I have 5 fingers, I think. Well, that's what I see. But essentially, if you're given different tasks, you need to rely on the other person to complete that task for your survival. So if it's expanded upon to the point, like, from that basis alone, the government asking for taxation for better care in order to fund the things and fund the people who are taking their time for that care, I think it'd be reasonable if it's done correctly. I'm no politician. I don't know anything about privatized insurance or universal health care or anything like that. But if there was a way for the assurance in the communal effort of us being able to give what we can give as a reasonable expense of the integration in society and have that be a benefit for the masses to help kind of encourage that, it's a very good means of reciprocation of person to politician.
Yeah.
So the biggest issue with conservatism and liberalism is the distrust and trust into something what we're offering.
Right.
A lot of people are in the dark, including me. I know nothing about politics.
I think it's interesting you say that because the Republican view is, or I should just say the conservative view in any government, because I'm pretty sure it's similar, is the less government, more leave it to like individual, like smaller governments to make decisions kind of thing, like less big government. But it's like they're also the people who have their hands or have like corporate hands in their pockets. Then, well, I shouldn't say they have more than the Democrats, because I feel like it's pretty even across both sides. But
each side has both sides. I'm very liberal socially because for me that doesn't matter. In terms of politics, there needs to be some rhyme or reason to help establish something socially.
yeah,
So I guess in that idea, I'm kind of like leftist centrist,
mm,
if you want to put it in a category, but it's hard because I don't know too much about politics. I typically just look at the debates and say, this person really presents himself well, or this person's insulting people. Why would I want that person to represent my country?
yeah,
And that's a slippery slope too, is just like labeling yourself with parties.
Right,
Because
it could always shift depending on who the candidates are.
yeah.
You're voting for a person, not for a party, although people do fight for the party because they hold specific laws in the Senate or representatives.
Yeah. I think,
Swaying the votes
because
and
obviously
all that
media plays a huge role in how the populace perceives politics and sees how it's being, run out. And it's always like, oh, they use the colors, red and blue and the animals, and they really like group everyone together. But every once in a while you see like an infographic surface where it's a spectrum, and they put the people, the figureheads they are referring to. So, for example, a presidential debate or something, and they kind of put them somewhere on the spectrum so you get a better idea of where their ideas line up.
Right.
And I'm like, that's a better representation of
Yeah.
ideas.
It's a double-edged sword, because when you place the label on there, that's the expectation of said label. And there may be a different policy where maybe if somebody is more conservative, but the person's signed for liberal, but they have one policy about firearms that they
Right.
really like, then it may still dissuade them, even though they agree with the policy they put. And it's more of the labeling. However, for people who are looking to get involved with their political world, which I would highly recommend, especially when it comes to presidential elections and things like that, to do your due diligence. As somebody who lives here in America, we have the right to vote. We should really work on that and enforce that to make sure we don't lose those kinds of privileges. So it's good for people from the outside looking in to say, all right, so this person's this, allow me to look more into this person. And that's a very similar way to look at politics, the same way to look at psychology, which is something I know a lot more about. I know nothing about politics, but in psychology I have a bachelor's degree and I'm working towards a PhD. I've done some research and things like that. So from a psychological perspective, it's very important to diagnose and have those kinds of labels, because that gives a set piece to work from. It's essentially a foundation that you can improve upon. Like for me, my dissociation is entirely unique to me. However, having the foundation of dissociation has allowed people to have a focal point.
Right, the context to work from. Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
and I definitely think that should be more made aware, that the diagnosis that you get, it is the label of it, like you said, a foundation to grow into, to understand it, instead of that is the thing that's putting a ceiling over you and locking you in. I think people can see it that way
it's
too.
not the ceiling, it's the floor.
Yeah.
It's the floor we walk upon, and then we can take different steps upon the different steps.
So that's exactly like an exact parallel to politics and how we, as at least in America, identify Democrat or Republican.
Exactly. And in order to be a true proprietor or truly knowledgeable of politics the same way you would psychology, you want to expand upon that floor. You don't want to restrict yourself to the name itself as to what it is and categorize it, because it could be a unique form of that categorization.
Right.
The world is dynamic and diverse, and everything has branching pathways. It's how all of our systems work, from the cellular level, the muscular level, the neurological level, with neurons and cells and different formations of the brain, and also the temporal lobe, frontal, occipital. They all have different functions, but they expand and diversify in such a powerful way that they envelop their own unique attributes, even with that foundation of being a part of the brain or a cell or a neuron. They all have different functions, even though it is based on that foundation.
Yeah. It's funny too because you literally said like we as humans all are so very different, and there's commonalities, but at the same time, there's more differences than commonalities at times.
Exactly.
So why do you think that as humans we tend to do this generalizations of things and just like label?
And the
walk
brain
away?
likes them. The brain loves them. They are the greatest thing to look at something and be like, yeah, that's that. Cool.
Judgments.
Blue, I know what that is. The brain likes what it knows. You know, this thing, dangerous. What is it? I don't know. I don't like it. But if I know what it is, I feel okay about it.
It's, again, fight or flight. I think
It
that's
is.
why we associate or categorize things, because we need a quick way to identify.
Yeah,
and
it's
that
for
goes back to
accessibility.
anthropology with, like, this evolution of humans and, like,
Right.
where we came from as, like, fight or flight creatures.
So it's almost like a primitive mindset that has just kind of carried along throughout the history of humanity.
There's the term for it. It's called heuristics or shortcuts.
Mm.
Essentially, your brain will look for shortcuts to use less resources to be more efficient. That's why people are subject to biases and things of that sort. We need to be aware of those, know their importances, and when they're out of control.
And I think the beautiful thing with podcasting is it unravels. It's like a reverse engineer of how we got to those heuristics.
I certainly hope so.
Yeah, well, that's-
I hope I'm not being biased and everything, but that's the thing. I have no idea. It's only until we get that reciprocation or that rapport to establish
Yeah,
what is and what
yeah,
isn't, and have
absolutely.
that kind of feedback, where we all need the feedback, which, full circle, back into the communicative elements of humanity and the bringing together
Yeah.
and how we could thrive based on that communion.
That's what I think is like the crux of like our mission with the brand, with the podcast, is just being able to sit down with anyone, really. Like I said, like you don't necessarily need to be an entrepreneur to be on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
And still be able to sit down and have your ideas and perspective heard and then questioned and delved into, because now we're taking that general idea or biasy and we're kind of expanding on it and
Right.
adding other perspectives, right? Our perspectives
Yeah.
in this example.
Like we always do with any conversation, you talk with a broad subject, how's the weather we're having? And then you narrow it down, it's awful, it's good. Why is it awful, why is it good? You narrow it
Yeah.
down even more. Because it's snowing, it always snows, it's Syracuse, it's awful, it snows until May, nobody likes it, we complain about it. It's like, but none of us move because we can't afford it because the economy is garbage here.
Yeah.
And it's like the housing taxes are abysmal, and like somebody talk about like, oh, it's 20 grand worth of taxes just to have an asset of a house to live in and have it on a property. And like that's how you narrow it down, and then you could further expand, and then you broaden. And
So something that
after
I've this to kind of build on this idea, something that I've had trouble understanding since we've kind of gone on this journey, is why so many people are, I wouldn't say that they're against conversation, but they're more like reserved in having a more in-depth conversation about ideas in
Because
general.
you're at risk of ostracizing yourself based on disagreement. It could be considered taboo to have the thoughts you do, and also it's kind of taboo as well to have the audacity to be the authority onto whatever that person's judgment is.
It's fair.
Whether you agree or disagree.
Yeah, whoever said that you have the authority to talk about your life.
Yeah, how dare me?
I do agree.
It comes from us
Yeah.
because for us this is an open platform to talk about whatever we want. But if we are in the real world or whatever it is we're doing, especially if we have an established societal or society-based contract, like with work or different things we do, there's certain things that are not meant to be said and have been established to not be said in that context.
Yeah, like if we were a large media network where we have all these investors in the pot, we get swayed in the political agenda of whatever they're trying to push down people's throat.
Right, because they're the ones who are funding it. In that case. So their influence was bought. So they bought the influence, and people have agreed to respond to that purchase of influence to the point where they're able to project it.
And the cool thing about social media is it's open platform to distribute whatever content you want to put out
I
there.
love social media.
And it's authentic.
It's so dangerous.
We have to keep ourselves independent
I love it,
from...
but it's a very volatile thing.
Yeah, for sure. But it does, like you're saying, it does allow for a platform like us to potentially sustain itself financially without the need of investors who
The
may sway us.
accessibility of media formats is the reason why my degree of broadcasting is useless. Because it is exponentiated to the point where you could get a microphone, plug it in, set up a camera to a video game, and then get famous for that.
Yeah.
And then
Everyone's
tie your hair pink.
broadcasters.
Yeah, we're all broadcast, which I love. I think that's amazing.
More people are able to be heard now.
Because it goes back to your ideology of like universal access now.
Mm-hmm. And the accessibility of this, all you have to do, because the internet is it's such a wonderful invention, and it has developed so much to the point where kids growing up are so used to having these tablets, and if done properly and not, so they're stuck there, it could be of a huge advancement for us entirely. Just like the way that the internet has over the past 30 years. We are at an exponential rate of technology and also an exponential rate of mental capacity based on the accessibility of knowledge from this new technology. And it's just a full, vicious, but lovely cycle of us essentially advancing ourselves to the point where these new resources that we didn't have in previous generations are now being so easily accessible for somebody, they literally
cheaper.
just type it in. And cheaper.
Are you familiar with the term rapid demonetization?
No,
It's,
but I think it means where you're losing money very quick.
The resources to make these products, technology, is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and thus leaving us to be more accessible to these pieces of technology.
Right.
Which creates a more democratized society. Everyone has access. Everyone has the ability to put themselves out there and talk about their feelings or thoughts.
Right. But if you look at it 30 years ago, there's probably a sense of rapid demonetization with telephone or cable television because that became the new norm, but they found a way to expand upon it. And they were still able to budget technologically.
Yeah.
So there was still, it's kind of a cycle of the aging of technology. Technology does not age well at all.
No.
My camera that I got 8 years ago, not nearly as good as the camera you guys are using right now, even though it was top tier, Canon T5i. Like, that was the thing to have.
Yeah.
It doesn't hold value.
It doesn't. It holds value to me because I love my little camera.
Yeah, but also, in a sense, it holds a certain type of value in the longevity of the technology and the fact that you're starting to see people resurface old cameras because you get a stylistic effect
Ooh, it's
from
vintage. Yeah.
that. Yes, you could put a filter on it, but it's not going to be the same as the actual thing.
It's not real, man.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
Get
that
back to
authenticity of the
1940s, like
vintage.
flop down camera with the
Yeah.
shutters on the side.
And just like seeing someone use an old piece of technology and it still works, like that aspect of it too is something
I think
that's
it's-
almost like there's no value you can put on that.
Right, but for me, I think the value just changes to the utility of the technology that we use day to day. So for now, like when we use Google and that, it's so accessible for us that we use it as a norm. However, the previous iterations of technology are now used as a formulative medium for creativity
Yeah.
and artistry. Like you said with the 40s cameras. At the time, that was just the cool thing to have, and it was very utilitarian. However, as time went by, people grew to respect that style visually.
Aesthetic.
Yeah, it was a great aesthetic. And now people incorporate that as an art medium.
And that makes it hard if you're trying to define what is valuable at that point, because now
Right.
you have these, like you said, branches off into this other
Because
expansive
yeah.
network where it's
artistic
like you got
value is very subjective. Utilitarian value is something that can be formulated, as
Logical.
So if you use it as utility, then that places the value for survival. It's very straightforward. Artistic integrity and artistic creativity is something that is entirely dependent on the individual that does it. And it's so diverse with people's interpretation as opposed to its function that the value of it kind of reaches a different category of value.
Yeah.
One thing that I was thinking about the other day was that you have like subjective value and you have objective value.
Yeah.
So utilitarianism was more objective value, aesthetic being more subjective value. And the interesting thing with subjective value is it's valuable based upon the amount of support that thing has, whereas objective value has the value in it in in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it doesn't need everyone else because it's like everyone knows that value is what it is.
It's
They
universal.
For example, you don't see many advertisements for plumbing.
No.
You don't see advertisements for electricity because that is considered a utility that we have as a norm, so they don't need to sell it. When it comes to
sells itself.
other things with the media, and they incorporated that, they place the value and they try to project that value in order to make sure that it's a good sell.
Right.
So yeah, there is a combination between subjectivity and
The
objectivity of value.
The hard part here is if you're talking about like liberalism, they're, I would say, more open-minded in saying universal subjective value. But by like putting themselves in that subjective value category, it instantly creates a sense of non-universality because it's based off of the people supporting that specific thing of value. And then you see on more the conservative side where it's like things like manufacturing and like physical products where they're actually creating more the objective value and efficiency of the process of the, let's say, economy.
Right.
And it's like maybe that has more universal value because it's more of an objective thing. But at the same time, it's like eliminating any sort of subjectivity on the matter. I don't know, I'm just like delving off. But do you see the parallels in
this?
this?
This is why there's the balance.
Right.
Yeah, that because if everything was all conservative, then yes, it would be like literally we're all just machines, just fucking making shit that's gonna.
Yeah, like the Ray Bradbury
yeah,
Utopian
balance.
Fahrenheit 451 society.
And if we were all super liberal, then nothing would get done because we're all fucking making art. You know, so you gotta like.
This is my art. Can you feed me? Can you eat it? Is it edible? Yeah.
Right, because then people are going to be bickering with each other over what the value is of whatever it is that you made when you need that utility factor too. So
I think, well, in terms of art and that kind of stylistic creativity, someone puts their own value in that, and that is an invaluable resource. If somebody else puts their own personal price on that, then that's entirely on them.
But it's not universal.
No,
that's the
it's
hard
not.
part.
But I think that stuff's meant to be diverse. I don't think that's something that should be subjective.
I think it's universal that those things are non-universal. Like everyone expects that like this painting that I painted, I'm a nobody that no one knows does art. I put $20 on this. And then Vincent Van Gogh paints the same thing and says it's fucking $3 million. People are going to pay $3 million just because of his name.
It's about the name brand. It's not about the art piece itself. And that's another thing, too, with subjective value. It's not the object. It's who is making the object and then who's supporting the artist. It's not necessarily even about the object.
You can support the meaning behind the artist. You can support the interpretation. You can support your interpretation. But that's why there's no set value on any sort of artistic piece, because there's so many different nuances. So I think in that terms, leave them to their devices sort of deal, and the fine arts, if it's established to be a fine art and you're able to incorporate that, I mean, unfortunately there's an inaccessibility to it, but that value was placed. I think if the value was placed towards different things and established based on different people, then it could be rightfully that price if somebody deems it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why
it's unfortunate because there's some really great pieces of art that are $300,000. I can never afford that. I might want that in my house.
Yeah, literally. But that's why I think they auction a lot of things, because then it, there is a starting price per se, but it usually ends up being whatever the person who cares the most about it wants to pay for it.
It becomes a sense of competition.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the end game of that competition places the value upon that piece of art. But it also determines what you mean as value. Do you mean the utilitarian, monetary currency, or the value of things that you reside within your own personal self, such as your own integrity, your own interpretation of joy or sadness, or macabre, or minimalist, modernistic, which I really like, which is what I'm going to make my soundboards.
But I think that what's cool about that is instead of having a universal understanding of the value of whatever it is that you made, you have to more or less pinpoint the communities of people that actually identify with.
It's personalized.
What you're making.
It's personalized, and that's the issue that arises when you're trying to understand what is like the most highest value. It doesn't become the highest anymore. It's more like it branches off into 600-700 different things of value.
And if it's a lower value than you expect, it's going to be such a blow to the head. Like, you're going to feel so bad because you're like, this is my heart. You're saying my heart is $30. Like, how dare you? But I think when it comes to that sort of stuff, like if you're intending to sell art, you're intending to make it for other people.
Mm-hmm.
If you create art, it's your own art, and then other people decide to take it upon itself.
Well, I'm not necessarily talking about art specifically, but if you look at it on a broad scale now, if you talk about like society, and we're trying to direct humanity towards the highest value, the ideal, like what does that become now? If you have all these different branches going in different directions, like where is the convergence of like, what is the highest ideal as a humanity? Where are we going?
For each unique ideal.
Yeah, I don't think
There's
I think
there's no specific element to what we all consider ideal. The beauty in our uniqueness is that our ideals are our own.
shit. What were we even talking about?
I don't remember.
So let's just delve into like
Yeah, you know what? Just fuck it.
your vision for the research that you want to do. You said you were going into school to get your PhD.
It's been a long run. I've wanted to be a psychologist since I was 10 because, once again, best way to save humanity is through humanity itself.
Mm-hmm.
I was unfortunately unable to completely afford school at the time because I'm the oldest of 7. And we couldn't afford school. So, at least not entirely for me. So I just said, all right, I'll find a way to make it my own. I've had a lot of different careers in order to help fund myself and support myself, while at the same time working towards this goal of getting a PhD in psychology. And this winter, I finished up all of my courses for a bachelor's degree. So
Nice.
I'm at like probably the 1/3 of the way there mark, which is actually astounding, and I never expected to actually achieve it. I just was going to keep going at it until I went.
So you saved up to do your bachelor's, or are you saving up?
I set everything up so that way I could get the financial aid and also afford living expenses and to make sure to accommodate for that, which was a tough road. I didn't have a lot of money for a long time. And then my friend was homeless for a little bit, so I became a male dancer in order to help pay for a house. And that ended up costing a lot more money as well. And I've just been trying to save and integrate work so that way I could also go into psychology work and pursue that fully without too many obstacles, because I'm known to have a lot of obstacles. But this is my 3rd degree because the broadcasting and music one, unfortunately, I wasn't able to continue that financially because the job I had, the servers got struck by lightning and I couldn't be a host anymore.
Shit.
Yeah, like what are the odds? There was like a 45-person layoff. And
Where was it?
I was going to be a radio show host for WCNY for the classical station. I was starting to work in there. It was an expansion of the internship. But when the servers got struck, like 40 people were laid off, unfortunately, and they couldn't support any more, talent or any more people with production. So they let me go.
And did you look at any other local broadcasting areas, or was it kind of like
no, at that
saturated?
point, it was saturated, and it was at the point where technology was becoming more easily accessible. So a lot of the jobs in production were being reduced. And so one person was doing 5 jobs if 5 people were doing 5 jobs in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And that advancement, I just saw it as kind of not a good opportunity.
Long term.
Not a good opportunity financially long term for me to pursue. Which is good because now I'm on a podcast for free, which is great.
Yeah, literally.
You start your own.
I could. That'd be something. I don't know if I have the time for that.
Question, just for my personal context, how old are you?
I'm 27.
Okay.
I am an old man. Weary bones.
Not that old.
You're young.
Oh, okay.
Definitely young in the game.
I was talking about this at work today, and my desk mate, she's turning 25 in April. And she's like, oh, it's like my quarter life crisis. And I was like, well, statistically speaking, you've already hit your quarter life crisis.
Tell me that.
What?
Tell me that. Oh, now I'm going to get another car or something.
But I said it like
Motorcycle.
jokingly to like just be cynical because I like just pushing buttons.
And it's something about being a 90s kid where we all feel like we've aged so much over the past.
I think we've seen a lot of
old
shit.
and weary.
Like, okay, yes, we haven't seen a world war or anything crazy like the past generations have, but we've seen our own
We see on our own
gamut of
crazy,
crazy shit.
and now we have a good computer screen that tells us all the crazy that's going on. It makes
Yeah.
us more aware.
We honestly
and
know
wears us
more
down.
about the crazy shit that's
It's
happening.
troubling times, and then we hear the crazy shit from crazy people who end up being able to post anything they want because of
Who
the
end up being the
accessibility.
president of our country.
Oh yeah, I'm not.
Well, to
a
some,
politician.
I shouldn't. I'm sure there's some people who may support him, but
I'm not
I personally
gonna-
think he's crazy.
I personally don't support him, but I'm not a politician. And
Fair.
I'm not even going to try to be. But no. Back to me trying to get more involved in psychology. I kept continuing different jobs. I was a preschool teacher for a year.
So
and-
this was all as far as creating like a financial security. So when you do want to pursue psychology, you would have that backbone.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that if I was pursuing this, I wanted to make sure I could go through it full on. I didn't want it to be that I failed halfway. So, and given that there were issues accommodating financially, I wanted to make sure that I had a safety blanket of that before I expanded, while still incorporating the beneficiaries of psychology and, more importantly, accommodating for others. That's a big thing. If it's not that, then I'm not doing the job. So if I can't find a way to help other people, then I'm not doing my service as a hero that I promised to be. And, so I wouldn't be really fulfilling anything. Whereas,
As a young 10-year-old, did you personally take on that responsibility?
it was established when I was 3 years old.
Okay. Damn.
Yes. When I was wee little me, little baby Art, at 3 years old, I went to a hot air balloon festival. And I was with my mom, and it was the most amazing thing that I've ever seen in my entire life. I was like, these are huge things. They're in the sky. They're up in the
Everywhere.
clouds. And I was like, Mommy, why is something so big able to go so high up in the sky? And fun fact about my mom, she is a walking Hallmark card. She is the sweetest human being. She will say the warmest, most heartfelt, and kindest things and mean them. So instead of saying, oh, hot air make balloon go up, or somebody's a pilot for them, she said instead, the things with the warmest parts inside of them can go anywhere they want to go.
Damn,
And-
that's literally a movie scene right there.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of my first memories. That's one of my earliest memories.
That's
And
wild.
I get to cherish that with my mom.
That's
And,
awesome.
yeah, she's my biggest supporter. And I'm her biggest supporter because I've helped her through her stuff. She's helped through mine. And because of that, our bond has grown stronger. And she's so amazing. And I hope she's going to listen to this because I'm going to tell her about it. And I hope she gets to this part. To say how great my mom is and how much I love her and how she is such a strong inspiration and motivation for me to continue being there for other people, because I know for a fact that there's somebody else right next to me that's vying for the same exact thing. And that is a huge support. So,
And what do you think that is? As far as how do you show that heartfelt nature to someone in the best way possible?
any way you can. As long as it's a way that you can, then that's the way it is. And that's just the biggest aspect of having this kind of giving nature.
Well, I think a lot of it's just like listening to other people's stories and
Mhm.
being there for them. And as a psychologist, you get to do that. You get
Oh,
to,
I can't wait.
Mm.
I'm really excited because ultimately my goal is that I want to be a clinician. I do want to be in the thick of it. I want to interact with people. Being a researcher, for one, entirely full time, you're kind of away from all of it. So you kind of don't have the experience of being able to provide. You just give the information that other people can expand upon. But for what I've realized is that a lot of people who end up writing books about it are people that are actually in the clinics and in the field. And they kind of expand upon the knowledge that is given by researchers based on their own experiences. And their experiences are so beautiful and vast. And I really want to be a part of that for people. And I think that's a good way for me to give the warmth and become that hot air balloon that's so high up in the sky.
It's a good analogy.
Yeah. Oh man, and I got that from when I was a kid. So ever since I was 3 years old, I just wanted to give warmth to other people. And this was before I was subject to a lot of things and a lot of pains and stripes that we face. A lot of people deal with traumas. I'm not going to go into too much detail with those because they're kind of irrelevant.
Fair enough.
But essentially, nothing was able to sway me from trying to provide for another person. I thought that was a very important quality to have. I felt a lot of value in that. And I just wanted that to grow as far as I could. I was the stupid kid, too, when you ask your parents what they want for their birthday, they say world peace, and you take them seriously. So I've been trying to do that ever since. But yeah, so I guess it originally started when I was 3. And that goal started to encompass a lot of the media that I was looking into and a lot of the video games that I played, where everyone wants to play the hero, and the hero is the one who is there for the other person, who goes through all the different levels to save the princess, or, will save all the animals by destroying the robots that they're trapped inside, and then fight the giant egg-shaped Robotnik man.
Yeah.
Dr. Egghead.
Yeah, Dr. Eggman.
Or Eggman.
Yeah.
Sonic, yeah.
Good Sonic reference.
Yeah, I'm a big old nerd. But essentially, I was heavily influenced by that growing up, because not only was that what I immediately saw, I know that there was a whole group of people creating that, which means that they were exposed to that same kind of sense of heroism.
Mm.
So as a result, when I was growing up, I wanted to be a hero. And I kept trying to be a hero. So when I became about 11, I moved to my school. For one, I was bullied because I was weird as hell. I still am, but I was able to work with it. Eventually, I figured
just
out
because of like the things you're into.
Oh, just because I was so different socially. I didn't know how to interact properly.
Oh, because you were.
And I was in a new place, and I was just a weird kid.
Yeah.
But eventually, I think about come 7th grade, 8th grade, I figured it out, started making more friends.
Mm-hmm.
Then I was able to really help them out. They realized that I was there to help people. I was helping a lot of people, a lot of victims of abuse. I would go to their house and just be their friend and make sure that they're okay. Exposed myself to a lot of danger when you shouldn't have when you're a kid. But I ended up meeting a lot of friends, and I still didn't feel like I was doing anything heroic. I still wanted to be, I was still dreaming to be a hero. So when I realized that, I turned my dreams of being a hero into a goal that I set for myself to become a hero.
Something more practical?
Yes. So I wanted to set myself. So I got really booked down on my studies. I started to work with other people more and interact with them to establish this kind of rapport, to make sure all the people around me are okay, to give a little bit, donate to charities, work at different churches and fellowship groups and volunteer my time. And even then, I still didn't feel like I was quite making it. I didn't feel like I was making the impact that I wanted to, even throughout this goal.
Well, that's the hard part, is you have this vision of yours, and it's only in your head. You're the only one that can see it, and then you try to project that onto the world, and it doesn't match the expectation that you have for yourself. And then you always feel like one step behind.
I felt so behind, and I did for a long time, because I never felt like I was doing enough, because there were people that were suffering. There were people that I saw in pain, and I just wanted to take that away, because nobody deserves to be hurt in the way that I've seen people exposed to being hurt. Mm-hmm. And eventually it just became so overwhelming. And then by age 18 and 19, I dealt with even more things on my own, and I was about to lose it all. I did. I had felt
like mentally lose it.
I was about to give up on being a hero. Mentally, of course, because of the dissociation, it takes full effect through adulthood. So it was even harder for me to connect, because my form of connection, it turns out, was to become this hero. And that was the big aspect of myself that I was able to put, for me personally, to establish my way in this world. So when I felt that was disrupted, it really caused a lot of problems. I didn't feel like myself. Like my identity felt gone, because my identity was surrounded by that sense in that goal. Was
there an exact moment that you felt this complete disruption, or was it just kind of over time it kind of slowly got to that point?
It was built over time, but there was a moment where I thought that my reality wasn't real. I dissociated so badly that when it came to my interaction with this reality, I didn't see it as something that was real. And I was just out of it. I felt nothing. There was no connection. I couldn't recognize my face. It just appeared hollow and pale. And it was just a really dark place. And I'm not a dark person, but I knew that I was feeling nothing, non-existence, nothing was prominent or mattered. And I was just failing at being this hero that I built the foundation of my whole life upon,
Mhm.
because I thought it was worth it that much, but I was still not able to do that because I wasn't able to go to school the way I wanted to, or I couldn't even think properly or react properly to things because I'm so off as a human being, because of how abnormal I am and dealing with other people's suffering and having to deal with a lot of different crises at the same time. It almost got the best of me. And I, regardless, thought I should do something. And that's when I started to go to community college for broadcasting. And it was a couple months in, I started to meet people, and I wasn't really feeling anything, but I was at least doing something and getting
Right.
involved because I didn't want to stop. That was the important thing. Like, I still wanted to fight to continue.
I think
being
it's
a
still
hero.
heroic in that moment that you were still able to be like, you know what, I need to still.
Well, thank you. And
Go,
that was
you
the
know?
biggest thing, because when I was in it, I was like, the hero always defeats the villain. The hero always has this moment where they look at themselves and they're down and out, but they still stand up and they grit
Yeah.
their teeth and they go and take on the world and they save it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually I was like, this is probably the moment, but I don't know. I don't
So
even
maybe
know
you
if
just
this
had to
is real.
save yourself first before you could save others.
Well, what happened was, a couple months into school, I met a buddy of mine. And this guy, he was a goof. Huge nerd. And it turns out he loved being a hero, and he loved working to be this hero. He loved comic books and video games, and that's the kind of thing that he wanted to be. He wanted to be like Captain America or, any sort of other character because of what they could do for other people.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this guy, I get that.
So you
But
connected
I
pretty
couldn't.
quickly.
So
yeah.
we did, very briefly. And a few months in, I came out and I came clean about how I was feeling and what was going on and how I never felt like I lived up to my potential. And he stopped for a minute and he looked at me and he said, everything you're doing is you already being a hero. And this guy that I've only known for a couple months, who has been doing quite literally the same exact thing that I've been doing my whole life to other people, did that to me. And just that thought process where I've been doing that the whole time. Every person that I've interacted with, every time that I went out of my way, was me being a hero. It was no longer a goal. It was never a goal. It was never a dream. It was something that I was already being.
It was reality.
And it was just so amazing. And this kid, he just looked at me and he's like, you look like an arty. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, I mean, it's from your last name. So you're kind of arty, artish. But also the way that you talk and the way that you are is something that has this subjective value to it. It's something that has this value that you can't put a price on, but people all know and all wish to grab. And so that day, we made a promise. And the promise was to continue being a hero every day for the rest of our days. Because on the day this promise is made is the realization that we were heroes the whole time.
Damn. That's really deep, man.
And he passed away in 2013. His name was Mike Cardwell. And
Was he the same age as you?
he was.
How did he pass
Yeah.
away?
From what I gathered, he was a victim to a hit and run one night.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah, it was really sad because it was somebody who I wasn't able to get to know as much as I would love to, because he was an amazing dude. And just that notion itself and the fact that we have that promise together is the huge turning point that allowed me to just accept that I already am a hero. This is what I'm doing and I just need to do it more. And it's propelled me into this crazy instance where I've just been accepting any job I could, and then I was motivated to work even further, and now I have this degree, and it really sucks because he would do so much more than I possibly could. And it just compels me to live even further.
That's him being a hero for you.
He is a hero. He always has been as well. That's why we made that promise. He held up his end, and I feel compelled to live up to mine as art. So I do. And
Yeah, that's awesome.
it's something that I want to project. And the fact that I get to immortalize him in this podcast, even, For me, I know this isn't too big of a podcast yet, but the fact that I could just even mention this story of this human being who is so wonderful, who has been able to have this impact in such the littlest of ways, can possibly help other people realize that every single little interaction is something that is of heroism. Every little semblance of altruism, whether it's for your own means of reciprocation or to genuinely help somebody out that you care about, that is heroism. That is being somebody to help further the communicative elements of this world and humanity within itself. This unification that we find within ourselves. And I just crave so much to be able to bring that to this whole world because of how beautiful it is and how wonderful it can be for these people. The smallest of interactions can make the hugest of impacts. A tiny little, very naive and stupid, mind you, promise to continue this heroism that you so found out that you had after you thought that you lost it. Or this interaction where you ask somebody a question and they respond with something beautiful, like a walking Hallmark card of a mother, saying something very sweet to their kid. Just thinking, yeah, this is a nice thing to say. It has so much of an impact. It's had so much of an impact on me. So I know that every single thing that I say, vicariously through Mike Cardwell himself, the person who dubbed me a hero and has always been one, is going to have such a lasting impact on even one person. And that one person is the reason why I know that I'm continuing to be a hero. Every interaction we have with the people we have in our world, whether it's big or small, the way we carry ourselves, when we take something seriously, when we stand up against something or are really mad at something and you just want to be adamant about it and you absolutely hate that, but you stand up for, whatever injustice it is or why you see it's wrong. If you know it's something that is meant to be a benefit for people and it's not, or anything small or big like that, if we can combine those together, it can help bring this world together. And it's the way that we could save humanity through humanity itself. And that's what I want to encourage. And that's why I'm fighting to get a PhD, because I want to make sure that I can portray this accurately and intelligently.
Yeah.
I know that I can't as much as I want to right now, because there's so much about the brain that we don't even know. And even if I get a PhD, I will still have no idea what I'm talking about. But if we could find the semblance and the commonalities that can help bring that altruism together, I think that is what we can do to make all of us heroes. And that's what I want.
Well, a lot of what you're talking about is mindset and being able to change your mindset. Instead of viewing something this way with high expectations and not meeting that expectation, it's maybe just like finding that sense of peace within yourself and being like, I am good enough. I do have the self-worth that I'm striving to have.
We all do. For me, ultimately, when it comes to that, if you find yourself a goal that even if you fail at it or don't even come close, you find solace in doing it, that is a goal worth having. For me, it's near impossible to do what I keep rejecting. And I know that. Even like eons and eons from now, it'll be near impossible. People have disagreements. People will fight. And people may think of only themselves. There's a lot of negative characteristics. But if there's somebody opting to fight for that, this untangible goal that we could possibly think of, there's a chance, there's a small chance that we could get a ball rolling in even the slightest direction.
Well, it's the process, not the...
Yeah.
Well, like they say, the journey, not the destination.
Dude, yeah,
I
like
literally
the classic
was
book,
sitting
The
here
Alchemist.
thinking about Gary Vee. He's a famous entrepreneur that Kyle and I listen to a lot, and his it's maybe a little bit more attainable than, say, an average Joe, but like his unattainable thing is owning the Jets, the football team.
Oh, okay.
And so he literally talks about it all the time. He's like, do I think I'll ever own the Jets? He's like, I mean, I'm not sure. It's possible, but like I don't care about if I ever actually own the Jets. It's just about the process of getting to
Yeah, it's
that
about doing it
potential.
and things to come by.
Yeah,
You guys are like the
exactly,
book, it's a classic book, The Alchemist.
Yeah.
By Paul Cohen. That's the entire theme. Good book. I love name dropping books. It makes me feel super smart. But they're also really good reads. Like, I would highly recommend. That's a classic.
Also, there's a theory in psychology that's called the hero's journey. Are you familiar with that theory?
Kinda, but if you want to elaborate,
I think
that
it's
would help.
Carl Jung. I'm not 100% sure what psychologist, but basically it's saying that like in the hero's journey, there's going to be this low period where you feel like distraught and like the world is all against you. And that is part of the journey itself. Like you having that low point of despair is like all a part of that. It's all encompassing, and like it's showing value in all of the stages of that to get to resolve, which is maybe peace in yourself or accomplishing a certain goal, like getting your PhD.
Right.
But like learning how to appreciate all the steps to the cycle of the hero's journey.
Ever since my dark point, when it was really bad back in the day, and after the catalyst of the realization that I've been a hero the whole time because of the promise I made and the friend who I wish so much was still able to be around and do what he can. Dang. That's real sad. I miss him. But I've learned to try my best to take note of every single little thing and do everything I can to try to expand upon it. Because for me, I'm very knowledge-based. I like to learn things. I like to just absorb all these little factoids that I can about it. And for me, that's the way that I can appreciate it. So even the most minute thing, if you take the time in the way that you can to give to it, then I think that's a way that you can learn to appreciate every little thing. And I think everything is worthy of appreciation to some degree.
And that's huge in and of itself, just having the self-awareness to know what kind of value you bring to the table.
Dude, if I wasn't self-aware, I don't even think I'd be able to walk right. Like, there's so many different things going on in my head. I have to make sure that I say the right thing in the right time and things of that sort, just because of what I deal with and the way my brain works. But it's all part of it. And I think it's important to have this sense of introspection and the sense of self-awareness to really make sure that you're doing your best, and also to be cognizant of how you can improve and things of that sort.
I was just thinking as we're talking about this that like a lot of people think of success as, you know, the saying started from the bottom, now we're here, and they think it's just this quick like straight route to success, but it's really like the stock market, and half the time it's like you could have a huge success and go even lower than you ever been before you reach the true highest point you'll ever reach.
And it's like if you attain that highest point, if you do achieve the success that you want, what do you do after that point?
That's why
you might as well just bury yourself and get out of this world.
That's why I think it's important to set
or set another goal.
I think it's important to always have at least one goal in your life that is almost unattainable, so that you're always striving for something.
Exactly.
And you can achieve other goals along the way, but there's always that one that keeps you motivated to continue improving who you are as a human, and in your example, helping others, you know, improve their beings as well.
Because as you go across the journey, you are attaining that goal in smaller degrees.
Yeah.
And I think additively, once you do that enough, that's how you reach that end goal. Even if you do reach the end goal, you're going to find another goal. Yeah. You know, I'm the hero of the world, now I got to make sure it's maintained. What do I do? You know, and I'll have to continue to think beyond that. You know, do I put the fires out, or like everybody's really good so they can put their own fires out? What happens when somebody does suffer? Because that's an inevitability. Like, what resources do we have to help them out? And that's why I think something like psychology, like with a big focus, is actually being a beneficiary to somebody's mental health and help them accommodate for that. That's why I want to pursue that so much, because you could help accommodate for all these niche details that are going to arise in the ultimate goal of trying to provide for this world, or to have some sort of unity and a fight against these adversity to help other people survive and thrive the way that you so desire for yourself.
I think another importance of having that goal where there's going to be the ups and downs is when you do experience an up or a down, you're getting that perspective, so the next time you reach that point, you know how to handle it.
Yeah, approaching it with a sense that you're always gaining something out of it, even if you lose. And also, just hitting on this topic, I've been studying a little bit of psychology in terms of like goal setting and like the approach to the most efficient or best way to effectively achieve your goals. And it's not in the act of actually setting the goal. It's more about creating a system that you can do on the daily
the
consistent.
steps, the objectives.
Consistent.
It's not even about the objectives. It's not like saying I'm here and I gotta get to this level to achieve. It's more so like I'm here. Now what is the system that I'm already at to be able to just keep churning on the daily, to be in this routine. So instead of thinking of like, oh, I want to be the world's best singer, that is a goal that the expectation that we set. Instead thinking of it in terms of like every hour, every day, I'm going to practice singing. So it creates this sense of like, okay, more attainable. I can do this every day consistently instead of thinking in terms of this far-reaching thing.
Yeah, it's essentially, long story short, setting attainable goals to reach the currently unattainable. So that way that could become a possibility and you could rehabituate that into the count.
And you can make it even more internal. Instead of saying like, I want to sing one time every day for an hour, you can just say, I am a singer. That's who I am as a person. And that's the realization that you kind of have.
Instead of it being so regimented, it's more just like muscle memory. So maybe at first you have to start with it being regimented, but once you get used to that system, you can stop thinking of it in that sense.
It's more about understanding who you are as a person, because if like
how do you shift a current mindset of not thinking in that way?
So if like let's say I want to become the world's best singer, it's just I am the best singer. Or I am a singer. That's who I want to be, and I already am, and what I'm going to project into this world. Like you, for instance, you were like, I want to be a hero, and then you kind of ground yourself and be like, I am a hero, and now you do the hero-y things on a day-to-day basis, and you subjectively instead of externally being like that's what a hero does, it's no, I am a hero, and this is what is projected into the world because I am a hero.
Okay, so it's like projected based on the growth of the experience, and then that becomes let's vary so much like it's not about the goal, it's about the journey. And you are putting in more of an enforcement on the journey itself by making it more internalized and embodying.
Right, embodiment, and it's subjective. And the beauty of subjectivity is you can make anything out in the external meet that subjectivity internally by just changing your mindset on it, kind of thing.
Cool.
I guess my question here is still, regardless of the affirmation and internal understanding of I'm a singer in this example, say you're saying that, but like you never got into a system of singing to develop. Like, how do you shift that mindset though?
Well,
how do you
start
get into
doing
that
it?
regiment?
Instead of saying like I'm going to do it tomorrow, you just start doing it. So if you really identify as a singer, then you think about, okay, what does a singer do? And I'm going to start doing it, kind of thing. Right. Instead of setting
I'm just asking this for the listener's purpose. Like, I understand it, but yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like, I am a singer, so what would a singer do? Oh, they probably do this. All right, cool. I'm a pretty good singer, what would I do? I'd probably record an album, all right?
Right, cool. and I think that if you're saying, for example, or even in your example, I'm a hero, right? Or I want to be a hero, I am a hero. If you're not executing the best way, at some point you'll come to understand that because you're not getting to where you want to be. And then you're like, shit, I need to do something here, right?
But instead, you're like, I am a hero, and now I'm projecting out hero-y things. Yeah. Like, in the day-to-day,
Well, I try.
or it's having someone more or less validate what you may not think is happening, but in someone else's perspective, it's like, actually, you are hitting that. You just maybe set a higher expectation.
Because for me, it was sort of the opposite for a while, where I attained the goal and I was reaching towards the goal without the realization that I was already encompassing the embodiment of what it means to be a hero. Without even, like, nobody really knows what it is to be a hero. There's shows about it, there's media about it, there's a cool anime about it, to say. But I mean, and they all like revolve around the idea. So you have to find your own sort of niche, and you make the goals become your own by the way you develop the goals themselves. So like for me, the best way for me is to inform or to give or to be of help or of service or to take my time. All of these things, if I am able to register that as a heroic act, then it is something that I consider to be me fulfilling the promise that I continue to make. And it goes back to the subjectivity of it. You need to establish the goals based on the knowledge you have, and that continues to give a feedback mechanism, and it helps you kind of grow and grow and grow until you inevitably reach that goal without you even knowing it.
So to kind of wrap this up a little bit, what kind of impact do you want to have on humanity?
I want to, all right, big goal. I want to own a research facility so that way we can help streamline and remove the bottleneck of research. I think having that sort of accessibility and to streamline the process of being able to develop and deliver the research to possible mediums will make it a lot more accessible and attainable. Very similar to how the accessibility of the internet allowed a huge exponential expansion of knowledge. I think that doing the same thing in different characteristics in different subjects and topics, like for example, for me, psychology, I think we could expand exponentially in a similar aspect as long as we streamline the accessibility of the research process. So having a privatized research facility will allow people to send the papers in. You could kind of coordinate it and organize it to a way where there's no weird bottleneck, where there's a stack of research papers that we have a board look through, and it's the same board going through. If we were able to expand upon that and have people funded privately and expand it to establish kind of a platform socially in order to make it more accessible, I think that'd be a good way to do it. And now's a better time than ever to do it. Because, for example, there's private space. SpaceX, Elon Musk has been able to do that.
And
he's doing it his way.
You're able to get more shit done.
So you want to create more like a universal access to the ability to do research?
Yeah, the ability to do research, the ability to have it properly funded in that aspect, and to also coordinate it in a more seamless process so that way more research can be released properly and done properly. Ultimately, if you do a research paper, it may take 6 to 9 months to publish, and that's if it's approved. So you find the approval in about 4 months, and after like the 3 to 4 months, if that, they will tell you that you might need to make a correction. You have to resend it into another pile, and then go through the IRB of that specific area and the specific publisher, and it's frowned upon to send it to multiple publishers because now they're competing, and if they publish on the same thing, then they're not releasing the data. They're cooperating and releasing the data of private entities.
So it gets all caught up in like the rules and
it's
regs.
It's caught up in the bureaucracy,
it's
man.
It's definitely a super outdated system.
But
it is, and unfortunately, it's the best system we have. So I think if we find the means to reintegrate that, and for me, the best way would be able to do it very similar to Elon Musk on their own terms. And then if you find a way to do it, and you get like a way to do it outside of the realms of what's already established and not interfering with that, I think that's an opportunity to
make it more acceptable, as opposed to being radical. Like
essentially, the freedom to expand without the risk of compromising what's already established.
Yeah,
that's the hardest thing. Because if we went AWOL and flipped over everything about the IRB and it fails, then it's even worse than what it is. So I think having the separate entity in order to have the freedom to do that may be a potential to help figure out the best way to streamline the process.
And are you still figuring that out? How you would do that?
I think the best way to figure that out would be trial and error. So, unfortunately, because you'd have to see the results. You could speculate all you want, but I could be wrong because of my own biases or my own interpretation of what I want to happen.
Right.
Are you familiar with first principles theory?
No.
It's a theory in physics. It's basically the fundamentals of physics. And in terms of like how it's related to this, it's basically like you set, okay, what is the mission of this? Like, why am I doing this? And then you go back to first principles, which is basically looking at what is true, what is tried and true in the basic fundamentals, and you use those basic fundamentals to get to there. Instead of like how I guess we typically think, we always think about association. So like, oh, this clock, for instance, how can we make a better clock? People think, oh, well, we can change the color. We can add some bells and whistles. We can make it more efficient, more smoother. Instead, thinking of it in terms of why is that clock even existing? What is the purpose of that clock? And then you go back to first principles and you try to create something totally new to meet that purpose, utility of it.
So essentially you're removing...
deconstructing it.
You're deconstructing to
in a different way.
Reverse engineering.
Okay, so you focus on the core concepts and see if you can develop something new.
Is it so in order to innovate and make something better, or just something that does the same utility just in a different
So even
mechanism?
thinking in that way, it's by association. By saying better, you're already immediately putting yourself in a comparison. So it's just simply thinking,
creating
what
something
is-
that can also do it,
what
not
is-
necessarily better, just that it can do it.
It's about purpose and about figuring out what is the utility in that certain thing. So you have to really go in deep and understand, why are you doing this? And that is the most important thing, because then you can reverse engineer and look at different things out there that match that. Okay, what is that purpose? A camera also has that purpose, but someone over here is using a clock to match that purpose. What if we just use the elements of a camera to meet that purpose instead of even relating it to a clock?
Okay.
It's just deconstruction, and you find what's tried and true, and you take those pieces and you try to make it to the ultimatum. of the
Okay,
purpose.
so let's bring it to the whole my dreams of having a research
Yeah.
facility, because when I have this, inevitably I'm gonna be thinking about this. You know,
Right.
what are the core concepts that come with research? Accuracy. You want to have accurate and good research. We don't
Mhm.
want an anti-vax outbreak. We don't want people to misinform based on problem research. We want to eliminate the type 2 and type 1 errors that come through experimentation and see how we could reduce that, make it have a better internal and external validity and things of that sort. So accuracy. Accessibility. Right now, it seems like it's very extreme. It's based on the fundamentals of delivering the research, getting feedback on the research, and going through that back and forth process. So the feedback would be a core concept. That would be
Communication.
the communication, and also the bottlenecking. So making it quicker and faster. So how can we make it faster? Probably more accessibility,
So-
a larger branch, larger people involved.
So just to reiterate,
Mhm.
accuracy, convenience, no,
Yeah, convenience would be one.
convenience and speed.
Speed. Yep, and accessibility and outreach.
And then, so those are the elements that make up the purpose. Purpose would be higher in the hierarchy.
Well, the purpose ultimately would be knowledge.
Right. Expanding knowledge.
Right, and that is the thing. And it's a matter of attaining that knowledge in a proper way. So that would be the primary focus of any research institution, and it's the primary focus of what it is now.
To expand knowledge. That's the
Yes,
purpose.
To expand knowledge, to inform, and to focus academically and also apply it.
Mhm.
But that might not be in pertains to impertinence to the facility. It could be to the other people who access it.
Could be a byproduct.
Right.
Yeah.
So the byproduct would be in terms of the accessibility and the way the accessibility can occur. So I think those would be the core concepts if we were to establish it. Other than that, it's all these other little details and nuances that revolve in my head. How much money does it usually cost? What about the workers? And then I know nothing about economy, so I need to learn about economy. How do people get grants for research? What kind of research would I be doing? What's the best way to convey this research?
And those are all like the subtleties that you kind of get wrapped up into. And it kind of like distracts you away from the main purpose. Sometimes.
It can. It can, and you have to make sure that you don't deviate with the nuances too far where you lose that sight of what it is. So for me, ultimately, I would have to not so much separate, but also take into consideration that I promise to continue being a hero. So what is the best way of this service to be a benefit to everybody involved? Whether they access the knowledge, whether they are a patient and they receive this knowledge, and it's a benefit for their treatment, whether the people actually being a researcher can thrive in the field of it themselves to help perpetuate and promote the research that's being done. How do we not step on the toes of other previously established research facilities by trying to be innovative and really working with here, because I would want to focus on their well-being as well. I don't want to take away what they have established because it's doing great work and wonderful things for the people.
In a sense, it almost sounds like what you're describing is the internet itself.
I guess, but if you want to reduce the internet to psychological research, because the accessibility and just the openness of it.
Less noise. Yeah.
But how do we stop viruses in that case? You know?
Yeah.
What's going to stop malware from getting into my facility and disrupting everything and causing my entire research facility to blue screen?
There's definitely going to be a lot of different parts and
There's so many
mechanisms of what that would look like.
And
But
to go...
you also have to take into consideration that taking on an endeavor like that doesn't mean you have to do it alone.
Exactly. And I was just about to say that. I interrupted you so that way you could say the same thing I was going to interrupt you with. Look at that. But yes, ultimately, going full circle back to the communicative and communion aspects of humanity itself.
Mm-hmm.
We all have these established niches where we thrive with, where we unify, and we could focus on a greater goal where we all do it collaboratively. And the collaboration is the most important part.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot do it on my own. I can't even do it with all these people. I know that. But if I try, it could set the ball rolling so that way other people can.
Right.
And it goes for that. And then the ability going even further back, I'm trying to put it all together. I have no idea how I am, but it's kind of happening, and I'm really cool.
You're doing a good job.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the feedback. It validates me so well. But you go even further back with the aspects of where we need to establish freedom of one's thought and their personal selves. That within itself can be that niche that is necessary to expand upon to help this inevitable innovation or this creation of a new project or the way we could expand upon ourselves as a whole. And if we subject that one niche or that one person to adversity or suppress them based on that, we might be removing an integral characteristic that is unique to that individual based on the uniqueness of that person's life that is just as different as the person next to them.
And the uniqueness is what allows us to progress and evolve as humans.
Yeah, I mean, if everything was black and white, how much advancement do you realistically think we would have had? And I mean, we've definitely had moments in history where we've limited ourselves because of that black and white mentality.
Sometimes literally, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
That's horrible. But like, I think in terms of expansion, we're also exponentiating with comfort with that. We've come a long way, and even more so in the past couple decades than ever, we've expanded upon those, the liberties and freedoms of being a human being, and how we should not be subject to ridicule based on who we are, what we stand for, what we look like, how we act, unless you sign a social contract, you have to act a specific way, and then you deviate from that, and things of that sort. So we've come a long way from that. And I think it's just going to be forever exponentiated in the same ways that a lot of things are currently with technology. And it's just, we're in this whole, I don't even know what to call it, plethora of knowledge and expansion that has happened so rapidly. I think that things that are, even just things that are distant thoughts and dreams can become a reality in just a few decades if we work into this kind of expansion that we are currently undergoing.
Well, they were even saying things of the nature of, in the future, we're going to have virtual reality. And in that virtual reality, you're going to merge with artificial intelligence to be able to go in this virtual reality to play out scenarios and simulations of these ideas, theories that you have by using research that you give the machine. And you can see, firsthand from experience in this virtual reality, what's going to play out.
So it allows you to actually experiment. Instead of just envisioning it, you're actually able to experience it.
It's a more visceral simulation.
Yeah.
But I think...
So to play kind of with your idea with doing research, I don't know how quick this is going to happen in the future, but you could bring your research into this virtual reality simulation. You don't necessarily have to create this physical facility of a research. It's all in the digital space.
I think we do. And here's why. Because, for one, we're not even close to understanding the capacities and the actual data structure that is the human mind. We are very, very bare bones figuring it out. I think a couple years ago, we found 1 cubic centimeter of a rat's brain of a neural mapping, and that was as close as we've gotten so far. And even that took years. So I think we're going to continue to grow exponentially to attain the diversity that is the human mind. However, in order to do so, our brains ourselves would have had to expand in order to incorporate that in. So it'll be a continual race, essentially, of feedback to where we reach this run point when we're right here. What's next? Probably to reach our point now. And in order to do that, we need to understand that point here. But to do that, we need to be here. and so on and so forth. So it's
It's
just
like checks and balances.
right, and it's going to continue to grow and feed upon each other, because there's no way that with the simulations we have today we can recreate the aspects of real life, especially to such a diverse means, and that's what makes this so beautiful. There's trillions and trillions of neurons operating to help us look at things the way that we look at them, even if we can't even interpret what they actually look like. Our brain has developed a projection with which that is. And when we expand upon our knowledge of that to utilize that for other sources, we need to require a higher capacity in order to figure out how that operates. And it's just going to continue to exponentiate the way
And
that
it has to be grounded in reality, is what you're saying.
It
In the
does.
physical reality, because that's the truest form.
We can't get lost in the things that are essentially primitive in comparison to the diversity of our human mind. We can only recreate things within the confines of our thought based on our structure, which, sadly enough, is not the entirety of knowledge on our own structure. So it's essentially going to be something that we can never attain, but we can attain a specific level and a goal.
Yeah.
So the goal's there, but if you embody it within yourself as the interpretation of AI and the continual feedback that I am somebody who could recreate these simulations, and then you continue to recreate the simulations, the goal of actually mimicking the human behavior that you're currently at is not really the ultimate encompassing of it. It's more of the embodiment, in your words, the embodiment of the goal setting and the routine of continuing to grow artificial intelligence and technology to the point that it can recreate scenarios of the present time. That you'll be able to do so. However, to create scenarios in the present time, you would have to do that in the future. So therefore, you'd be creating it of the past, of that present time.
Which isn't the truest form to
No,
go back.
because at that point, when you figure out that present time, you're going to be in the future time where you probably learned a whole lot more.
Right.
But in a sense, you could bring that back to the present reality.
Well, yeah.
It's kind of like the hero's journey, like going off and like having this experience, trials and tribulations, and then coming back to speak to the people.
Right. We don't know a limit because there's no conceivable limit. There's no limit that we can quantify. We can only quantify the potential expansion. And until we find a wall or a limit or a barrier to that expansion, we can't conceive it. Because it's outside of the realms of our own thought, essentially. Which is very
Your mind
philosophical and weird.
I just have to say, I love that you brought it back to like the whole theme.
I've been trying so
I was like,
hard.
This kid got it. He's got it.
Because I'm known to ramble.
You're literally doing our job for us. And it's fucking sick.
Oh, well, you're welcome. I'll expect my paycheck in a week or so. I don't know. Give me some ad funding. I don't care.
Like the $4 we get on our ad that
You know
runs on
what?
this.
You could keep the $4. It's like the experience I'm having here is going to be great, and I'm just really grateful to be able to do this with you guys. I'm grateful that I was able to speak on behalf of, an old friend that has been able to really encourage the things that I'm doing, and the fact that I could just once again the fact that I could immortalize him in this accessible platform that we all have is just so groundbreaking, and honestly something I didn't expect to be able to do.
I'm honestly like I said before the podcast, I love coming into these interviews not really knowing who I'm talking to, and then kind of learning along the way.
Not met you till today. And I was like, do you want me to say any questions? You're like, nah.
And I think that's
we'll figure it out.
That's a huge benefit of the structure of our podcast is keeping it a little bit more organic and just kind of seeing where it goes. I mean, sometimes it doesn't come out as good as we'd like it to, and other times it ends up being, a really, amazing conversation. But that's the beauty of conversation as it is, just let it go where it goes. And
exactly.
See what happens,
my whole thing when I came here was my biggest thing was like, say what I know what I'm talking about. Don't flub. Don't ramble. I've had this whole thing in my head, and just eventually, you just guys have given me the accessibility to just go on rants and tangents and make it sound as reasonable as it can be, because these are really taboo and diverse subjects that are always open. Any soft science is open to interpretation to an extent. But I was just really grateful that I'm able to essentially portray my crazy ideals and my hopes and dreams in hopes that maybe somebody listening to this can follow suit.
Yeah.
And maybe they themselves will decide upon themselves to make a promise to continue being a hero of their very own. And that's what I really hope. Because
I think that's a
having
huge
that
takeaway
sense,
from this one.
yeah.
Just learning to embody who you are and what you want in this world, this craziness that we all experience.
Yeah. And in doing so, you're fighting the evils of this world. And in doing so, you are becoming a hero. And it's just not so much of a becoming or a growth, my apologies. It's more of the embodiment of the hero that you already are. Because we are all potentially there, and we all already do that in our day-to-day lives. With every goal we set, with every person we interact with, that we want to leave a good impression or make them smile or tell them what's what to inform in the way that you wish to do that in terms of another person, that is within itself a heroic act. So long as it's not hurting yourself, other people, or the world around you, mind you. I don't want people to get the wrong idea.
Right.
The best mindsets of a hero can become that of a supervillain, so like you always have to be careful of that as well.
Yeah, and that's where that balance that we
where the
keep
balance comes
talking
in.
about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there has to be, and there's always needs to be a continual feedback of oneself to make sure that you are still enforcing the ideals that you so wish to become and so wish to portray.
Right.
And that's kind of the most important part.
Yeah, because it definitely can get easy to kind of get lost in everything that you're doing and forget.
Mm-hmm. And then you could be blindsided by it and be like, I'm a hero, the way that I'm doing that is right. And then like you have the Crusades or like the great burning of the Library of Alexandria because what you do is the best and you're the good ones.
We could have a whole
I'm sure we could. I don't just like
But I think it's good to
very
hit that
briefly.
so that, any potential listener to this, because I mean, this is going to forever be access to people as long as the internet continues to exist.
Hey.
So, yeah,
It's not
now
a
we're
scary
not
thought.
condoning being like, I want to be a shitty person. I'm going to embody being a shitty person and fuck everything up,
Yeah, no, we don't want to do that. And you don't want to do that, especially don't want to do that under the guise that you're doing a good thing.
Yeah,
That's
right.
the worst
Yeah.
part. You need to understand and be able to have the open-mindedness to understand when you're wrong and when you're right.
And that's what happens if like you have these strong convictions and you're willing to hurt other people for those strong convictions.
Right.
Right. To what extent is that an act of beneficence, or to what extent is that actually just blind harm to another person?
Right.
Mhm.
And that's
It's like
that's
recklessness.
especially hard when people need to assert themselves as well, because I think that's a necessary evil. You don't want to step on the toes of some people. You don't want to have this heated debate. You don't want to have to fight against them because nobody wants that. It's exhausting for both parties. Nobody wins. But there are certain parts where fighting is worth it. Like I would fight my darndest in order to establish this facility, but I don't want to step on the toes unless
It's like
And
working hard.
But that's a trait of a hero is courage, and it takes courage to feel uncomfortable enough, but still do
Exuding.
it. Still execute on that discussion because it needs to be had.
Case in point, I'm constantly uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
Like near constantly. Even right now as we speak. I came in here being like, I have no idea what I'm doing. But
That's a hero.
oh, well, thank you. That's what I promise to continue to be. But yeah, it does take a lot of courage, and you need to really step outside of your comfort zone in order to truly appreciate that courage and to encompass it.
Mm-hmm.
We need to step outside our bounds. There's so many different. I could go on for hours and hours about like all these different traits that I consider to be heroic and how I will always fail to achieve them, but nonetheless will try. But yeah, it's whatever ultimately those like key concepts of your unique aspect of oneself and those characteristics and your strengths that you can embody for the sense of altruism or the gain of yourself or those around you that you care about or even don't care about.
Mm-hmm.
That within itself is what a hero is. And it's up to the individual to find their own sense of heroism and what makes them a hero.
So given
That's
that
what I
we
said.
are on this journey through life in this human experience, we usually end the podcast with this last final question, which is, what does it mean to be human?
You're asking the wrong guy, dude. I think of ones and zeros. No, but, ultimately, I think the biggest aspect of being human is to live as a human.
Damn.
I know it's the answer that nobody likes. We all want to know these different answers into such a narrow concept, but ultimately, there are universal traits of humanity that we all share. We live, we breathe, we experience, we learn, we commune.
We have consciousness.
We have consciousness. We have community. We have interaction. Even if we are considered or feel ourselves to be alone, there's always outreach of interaction within this world. And I think through that experience, the experiences that you have in themselves and the commonalities of all humans themselves are what it is to be human. And I think the more that we could delve into those commonalities and universalities of human nature and human traits is the definite way that we could truly understand what it is to be human in a more detailed way than to be human is to be human and to live is to live.
On that note, thank you.
Yeah, it's been an honor. Oh, I can stand up. Yes.
Before you go, any place you plug your social media, anywhere if you want people to follow along on your journey?
I don't have anything yet, but my name is Art Cowart. You could find me on Facebook if you want to message me, I guess. You see my face on the camera, so what's up, guys?
Yeah,
it's the same face that's on my profile picture.
We'll put your profile link in there, so if anyone's interested to
and if I do
follow you or continue the conversation.
And I'll gladly update with you guys if I do actually find some semblance of success someday. Who knows?
Awesome.
Until then, thank you guys so much for having me.
Yeah,
this has been really fun.
Yeah.
It's very surprised. It's very casual, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thank you guys.
He liked the matcha tea.
I did, yes. The matcha tea.
So there you have it. Thanks again for tuning in to Bindlism, a philosophy to self-sufficient lifestyle. Be sure to explore other episodes of Bindlism on our Spotify and Apple podcast. You can find more Boho Hobo stuff on Instagram and Twitter at boho_hobo_, as well as on our Facebook page at Boho Hobo Lifestyle. It'd also be dope if you could subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Our YouTube channel has more episodes from Bindlism in video form, along with other random shenanigans that we're up to. We're constantly filming new experiences, so it's one way you guys can stay up to date with us in our journey. So yeah, I guess that's it for now. Until next time, peace.